Hello AP students. Well, you asked for it, you got it. Here we've got a little bit of annotation tutorial. So I'm using my my Aver U50 document camera, and I now have a YouTube channel. How about that? I never thought that would happen. Today's annotations are brought to you by the Musgrave Pencil Company, Shelbyville, Tennessee. Today specifically the this 909 Ceres. It is this pencil that will be the foundation for the MUS pencils that we're having made to sell in the bookstore next year. So I'm delighted to be part of that. Okay, I'm going to take my big fat face away, and we're going to go strictly to the page. Let's see here. So here we're at page, or chapter 10 rather. So let's take a look at some of the annotations that I have made, and just give you a feel for the kinds of things that that capture my attention. So I'm just going to read aloud from the first paragraph. The morning sky was featureless, a color like that made on paper from a thin wash of lamp black. Ralph stood stopped in the field, head down, blowing. He was harnessed to a sled load of locust fence rails, and they were heavy as a similar amount of stones. He seemed not to care to draw them one pace farther toward the edge of the creek, along which Ruby intended to lay out the snake for a new pasture fence. Ada held the plated carriage whip, and she popped Ralph's back a time or two with the frizzled end of it to no effect. Okay, so among the things that should have drawn your attention here at the beginning would be the morning sky was featureless, a color like that made on paper from a thin wash of lamp black. So what we're talking then is talking about is the color of the morning sky. So if I'm going to unpack that as a piece of figurative language, the tenor there is the color of morning sky. The vehicle is a thin wash of lamp black on paper, and then we get to the ground, which is an opaque gray, seemingly insubstantial. Okay. Let's see. I heard some music here. In this second sentence, Ralph stood stopped in the field, head down, blowing. He was harnessed to a sled load of locust fence rails. So again, you can look. I don't expect you to write down every single thing. However, there's plenty to write if you will take a look. So, you know, if you want to go ahead and mark that like as an A with a circle around it, and maybe you put 2 as your signal for alliteration, and then the load of locust fence rails, and really you might the A could stand for alliteration. The A could just stand for aesthetics, because that's basically what is the function of the acoustic devices that that Frazier is using at this point. Okay, all right. So you should have seen. They're laying out the snake for a new pasture fence. So it's not literally a snake, right? So the tenor then is the fence foundation, and the vehicle is snake, and the ground is a serpentine shape, curving regular amplitude. All right, so that's, like I said, that's the way I've marked it. All right, now more acoustics there at the end of this paragraph. Ada held the plated carriage whip, and she popped. So we could go whip, popped, and frizzled. She popped Ralph's back a time or two with the frizzled end. Got a little more music there with the time or two with the frizzled end of it to no effect. So if I'm making it just a specific remark, I'm going to say that the onomatopoeia, onomatopoeia. Don't be surprised if there's a quiz on that, and I can do that in the assessments thing on campus. So it is designed to make the scene, I'm going to use the word visceral, more visceral. That means that you can feel it. Yep. Okay. So now I could go through here and hit more on this page, but I'm going to go ahead and push over to the next page then, and we'll take a look at some of what we've got there. Okay. She set him to grazing on clover that grew at the edge of the tree shade, and then she and Ada worked at laying out a zagging line of locust down the creek bank. When they got the time, they would lay 3 more lapped courses atop the snake to make the fence. All right, so zagging, it's it's onomatopoeia in a certain form. So I'm saying here the onomatopoeia is discordant. The effect is to accentuate the difference between a man-made barrier pattern and nature's. Because men generally think in terms of angularity. Okay, so even though this is zagging and there is a certain geometry to it, it is is certainly less regular as you might see from a normal fence. The fences around your homes and so forth are certainly not. Don't take a zagging course. All right, so. Here we go. If nothing was particularly urgent, Ruby did whatever could be done in the time at hand. So that's clearly metonymy, which is standing for available or nearby. Down to the next the next paragraph. For the job of handling the heavy rails, so we've got more music with handling and heavy. The alliteration, of course. Era wore a pair of leather work gloves, but they had been made rough side too, and so when she was done, her fingertips were about as raw as if she had gone barehanded. So about as raw, rough side too, meaning inward. So this contradiction again is the sense that that Frazier in his word choice is trying to set the scene for us as readers. All right, let's take a look a little further down here toward the bottom of the page. By the next morning, she found a new hole gouged out in the fresh mud between the crib logs. It was a space plenty big enough for a hand or a squirrel, and maybe big enough for a small coon or possum or groundhog. So you should recognize whenever you see, polysyndeton and asyndeton is just so easy to recognize. And when you see it, you know the rules. Polysyndeton stretches things out, slows it down, makes the list seem interminable. Asyndeton, of course, speeds things up, gives a sense of urgency to the list. So here with a small coon or possum or groundhog. So in other words, it could be any number of small creatures. Excuse me. Then just again you read and you say she touched the trip plate with a stick and the thing snapped shut. Okay, right? So you can hear all this stuff. Then she touched the trip plate with a stick and the thing snapped shut so hard it jumped off the ground. Here's what I will tell you about writers like Frazier and Dillard, and then we're going to even read Michael Lewis, and you'll see he does it. The more you write, the more that acoustic elements will come into your thinking. In the last chapter, to Live Like a Gamecock, you'll recall the description of the boys that were unnamed and were, as Inman described them, had been raised with little more care than a pair of feral hogs. And when the kid looks at the fire and says "Doe boy doe," and Inman said that constituted his entire word hoard. All right, so word hoard there would be a crude substitute for lexicon. So in the lexicon of the writer, there are tens and tens and tens of thousands of words, but as the writer plies his craft, he will hear in his head the music that is so pleasing, so aesthetically pleasing to the reader that it just comes out. If I had you, for example, and just to tell you how this works in the creative mind, if I were to have you start to write sonnets, and I had you write English sonnets, which are going to rhyme A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G, and have the metrical pattern would be iambic pentameter, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. You write a couple, you write 3, you write 5. Next thing you know, you're thinking in iambic meter. And suddenly it becomes much, much easier because the words are going to start to come to you. They're going to be pre-sorted before they get to the sort of frontal lobe. Okay, so I'm not going to do too much here. You can see here, I assume, by looking at my annotations, and I'm going to go ahead and push this out so you get a more focused view here. But just among the things that I've marked in the book, Ada urged wrapping the teeth of the trap with strips of sacking, which Ruby did, judging the padding carefully so as not to err too much in the direction of kindness. Now, this is again the kind of writing that you need to pay attention to. There is a subtle humor there, okay? That Ruby doesn't want to err too much in the direction of kindness. Now we talk about word order, syntax. Notice how cleverly Frazier has ordered this, because what's the surprise word here? The surprise word is kindness. You'd think that what she's saying is so as not to hurt someone or whatever, but that's not Ruby's way. So my note is syntax, leaving the noun kindness to the end reinforces the sense that this sort of feeling is not exactly Ruby's first instinct. That is an understatement in the extreme. So this also characterizes Ruby's disdain for anyone who would stoop to rob them repeatedly and in a small way. Shouldn't think much of that. All right, so here we go in the next paragraph. She, Ruby, mounted and rode off bareback, and at the road she stopped and hollered to Ada to make herself useful by putting up a scarecrow in the winter garden. It's an indication of how Ada's human interactions have grown so coarse that that Ruby is hollering at her from across an empty space. In Ada's previous life, I hope you see that no one in Charleston hollers. Okay, not even the servants would holler because they had been trained to speak softly, quietly, come into the room and have a quiet word, not bellow across an expanse of farmland. Okay, I assume that you have noticed just how much in the way of onomatopoeia Frazier uses. So as we push down here toward the end, Notchwing was more vocal than the other crows, and said every kind of crow word there was. That's an example of what, figuratively? Say it yourselves. That would be hyperbole. From the sound of a dry hinge to the gabble of a duck being killed by a fox. So gabble is a marvelously onomatopoeic word. Ada had been tracking its doings for weeks, and Ruby had once got so ill at it that she let off a precious barrel of shot. That is a marvelous country expression. I used to live in Harrogate, Tennessee, in Claiborne County, up near Cumberland Gap, and I had one of my friends was an attorney in a nearby, like sort of the largest town in that area, which was New Tazewell, and she used to say that sort of thing all the time, that she got ill at someone, which I'd never heard until I moved up to the country. Let's see, so pushing down to the very bottom of this page, she went to the house. Upstairs she opened a trunk and took out an old pair of riding breeches and maroon wool shirt of Monroe's, his beaver hat and a bright throat scarf. That's an example of what kind of sentence? So we know that the verb is missing, so that makes it an elliptical sentence. The idea behind this, or the effect of it, is that it it creates a sense of brevity. She's being sort of matter-of-fact about the things that she's selecting. So Frazier uses his construction of the sentences to mirror her decision-making. So my note at the bottom is, the short, choppy sentence pattern doubles the quick, unconscious way Ada chooses the items. She doesn't want to think or dwell too long on the task of dealing with her father's effects. Okay. So no, she puts the clothes back in the trunk and went to her room and riffled through drawers. Another great country expression is that she prowled around in the drawers, or she prowled around in the cabinets, meaning that you're sort of sorting through things. And so she decided on the mauve dress, so I assume that you all know what that color looks like. Okay, so a couple of other things here at the top of the page. Armature is a nice word that you should probably look up, which means the frame used by a sculptor to support a figure being modeled. Notice again we've got frizzing as the nice onomatopoeia here. A rood, because we're in Easter season, and forgive me all you non-Christians out there, but a rood then is a cross or crucifix symbolizing the cross on which Christ died. So whenever you see a rood, that is what that's referring to. Let's see. Once again, you've got the country diction. When she was done, Ada backed off and examined her work. I think one of the reasons that Frazier's doing this, especially with respect to Ada, is to show you the the evolution. I suppose some people might say she is devolving into someone who is rustic, but she has to, because there's no chance that she can survive there in the North Carolina mountains, knowing only the things that she knew in Charleston that allowed her to get along there in that highly refined city. All right, so here we are at the bottom. She wrote down the date. She had drawn the notched wings of the crow. She wrote down the date and an approximation of the time, and then the current phase of the moon. So my note is, this is characterization of Ada, and I usually make a C with a circle around it to show me that I've got a characterization element to go back to. If I were going to say write an essay in the novel, I might be able to put those things together. So Ada is orienting herself in the world at an increasing level of detail and minuteness. If you remember, they're back at the end of, let's see, I guess this is chapter 8, when they are walking to the house, and Ada says, the blue one, that brighter one, is Venus, Ada said, as she and Ruby turned up the road to Black Cove. So that's a marvelous just sort of drop in that Frazier does to let us know that the things that Ada is wanting to learn, the knowledge that she wants to get from Ruby, she is beginning to get it. Okay, so again, I don't make a ton of notes on every page. So as I read, it might take me an extra, I don't know, a couple 3 minutes to make these kind of notes. So the business here about when they are burying the cabbage and so forth. My note here is that we should write a paragraph in imitation of this. Pick a focal point, and then arrange around it using the sort of orientation that Frazier uses here. As we move over to page 191, this is the kind of thing that I don't know if you would mark or not, but these are sort of the things that I find fascinating about his writing. So just the detail, the minuteness of the detail that Frazier provides us. So he's describing Ralph falling asleep in his traces there, and he says he would stand with one hind hoof tipped and his eyelids flickering. This is after Ruby had, I guess, had braided the tail. Afterward, though, he went about with his back quarters slightly tucked under him, nervous and embarrassed looking. until one or the other of them went and undid his tail and brushed it out. Just a great image of sort of male anthropomorphism, as though the horse would be embarrassed by having his tail in a braid. I hope you see that. Okay, so then the loser was to perform all the night work while the winner rocked on the porch and watched the sky darken and counted the stars as they appeared. So my note here is the undescribable beauty and tranquility of a simple act of being in the world, that one would simply rock on the porch, watch the sky darken, and count the stars as they appeared. Boys, let me just go ahead and say that life in the time of coronavirus is an opportunity for us to cherish the small things that happen. I find myself being so much more kind of attentive and kinder to people, calling my parents more often and so forth, because this threat that's looming over all of us terrifies me a little bit. Okay, let's see. So just another opportunity for us to do a little parsing of the figurative language, talking about the hair. She thought it looked like a hemp lanyard twisted together by a mad or drunken sailor. So the tenor there is Ruby's braid. The vehicle is a lanyard twisted together by a mad or drunken sailor. And the ground, you really have to work hard to find the ground here. So it's loose strands of material intended to be intertwined in a defined pattern, but ending up haphazardly woven. Okay. And I make clear the business about out from under the shade of the porch she could see that there was yet light enough to read a few pages from Midsummer Night's Dream. So there's more contradiction. One of my objectives in life is to read all the books that are mentioned in Cold Mountain. I've almost finished. The only thing I haven't read is Adam Bede. Let's see. So we'll keep going here. Once again, to begin with, is more contradiction. She never thought it looked much like him to begin with. Let's see. So here's another piece of figurative language that I unpacked. And though that was not precisely the effect of Inman's picture, the end of this is the thing about Emerson talking about sitting for a daguerreotype. You might want to look that up, by the way, if you don't know what a daguerreotype is, or a tintype. So the tenor is approximately true, as Ada saw it, and the vehicle is near the point at which a marksman or hunter has aimed. Okay, so this is obviously sort of sharpshooting metaphor there. Let's see. I thought this was this is again a sort of hilarious, in my opinion anyway, country expression. Men wore every kind of thing to fight in, from clothes you might put on for plowing to actual uniforms to garbs of such immense ridiculousness that even in peacetime someone might take a shot at you for wearing them. That is a beautiful rural hyperbole at work. All right, so you should then, if you're on this page here, Inman's portrait differed than most in that he had spent more money than usual in the case. The image was like oil on water. So I'm going to want you to go ahead and unpack that, and I'll probably ask you about it tomorrow. This is a nice, here at the bottom, this is a nice characterization of Monroe indirectly. Monroe had been reading by the fire in the parlor and had not bothered to come out to speak. So Monroe, despite the fact that he's a preacher, okay, a man who makes his living by connecting with human beings, is not devoted to social niceties. Again, it's ironic because of his position as a minister. But it also provides the source of Ada's thistleish comportment. She had to get it from somewhere, but it also might speak to the extent to which Monroe finds Inman maybe not a suitable suitor. Is that an example of polyptoton? think it might be. Another great, so if you want to practice on your own some sentence imitation, you could find worse things to imitate than this one. It was a damp, chill morning following a day of rain, and the sky was still half filled with high, thin clouds. The cow pasture by the creek was turning pale green with new shoots rising through the gray stubble of the previous year. Generally, we think of stubble as like what I have on my face right now, and I'll go ahead and show you. Got the chin whiskers rocking out here. I might not shave until we're all back together again. Another great country expression here is the word scrabbled. Love it. Here we've got the polysyndeton of, but it was wet, and his hands were wet, and her dress was smeared dark at the neck. More polysyndeton here at the bottom. She had not been sure if he was teasing or testing her or simply saying what he thought was the truth. Here at the bottom of the page, worth noting, he tipped his head back to taking Cold Mountain. There's an implied metaphor there, yes? To take it in. What does that mean, to take it in? Generally, it means to look at it in some, with some penetration, but it also suggests that that visually, we're like a container, Yet all was yet wintry and drab as a slate shingle. So the hyperbole accentuates the size of the mountain. And the tenor here, the relative hue of Cold Mountain is the tenor. The vehicle is slate shingle, and the ground is something two-dimensional and gray and featureless. Okay, so I'm just going to, one eye entirely lacked color and was set in her head as slick and white as a boiled bird egg with the shell off. So here, and I'm going to want you to unpack this yourself, okay? And I'm going to hide it from you. And just say that the simile's vehicle provides a visual and tactile image that is strange and slightly repellent, but effective nonetheless. Okay, so I'm going to back off a little bit here with the, oops, wrong way. There we go. So I'm going to back off just a little bit. So here are some of the notations that I'm making. You can see that I'm, quite minute in some places. Ada sat and pecked at the piano for a time. You should be able to see what the implied metaphor is there, right? Her fingers, as you see someone is not playing with the grace that I'm sure Tip Benson would have liked her to exhibit. Rather, she is just simply hitting keystroke by keystroke. As you can see, my fingertip looks like the beak of a chicken, a hen in particular. Okay, let's see. In Charleston at this time of night, there would be waves beating on bulkheads. Marvelous music there, right? We talked about in the first presentation that I gave you on alliteration as a figure of repetition, like the ending of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, waves beating on bulkheads. Okay, that bump, bump. Okay, that sound is echoed in the repetition of those consonants. Palmetto leaves rattling in the wind, the iron hoops of carriage wheels rumbling. Again, more onomatopoeia, and the hooves of horses. Okay, right? Hooves of horses talking. Great word. Talking like great clocks. And look what he's done here. Talking like great clocks. Fantastic. Do I need to go in for that one? I probably do. Okay. Talking like great clocks. I mean, can we get close enough to that fabulousness? I don't think so. Just one more? Yeah, perhaps. Okay, so I'm going to back out. Sorry about that. I hope nobody is motion sick. So notice you've got the paradox of auditory image. The report of a gun would cause a ringing in the ears, right? Ada could hear her ears ring from lack of other report. There in the mountains, okay? She's unnerved by the quietness. Okay? Let's see. Here now this is worth mentioning to you. What did bother her? This is after they parted there at the creek. when Edmund was bidding her farewell, taking his leave, as you might say in the country. How might she react to news of his death? She did not know that the prospect of it loomed darker in her mind that evening than she would have thought, and she worried that she had rudely dismissed Edmund's story, had not summoned the wit at the time to see that it had not been about an old woman, but about his own fears and desires. So my note is that this scene prefigures her ultimate change as a character. I hope you see that. Okay, and this is the last thing that I'm going to go over for you, since I took the time to make a drawing for you. She feared that without some act of atonement, they would take hold, as in these her behaviors. Okay, they would take hold and harden within her, and that one day she would find herself clenched tight as a dogwood bud in January. So, if you will forgive me for zooming in yet again. Oops, wrong way. Zooming in to tight as a dogwood bud in January, and there's my my little picture. That's how dogwood blossoms look. Not this time of year. They're starting to open up. So the tenor is Ada's receptivity to emotional experience. The vehicle is a dogwood bud in January, and then the ground is a small and tightly bound pre-blossom flower. Okay. All right, boys. Listen, I'm done. This is a long, freaking annotation series for you, but I hope that it was in some way helpful. And look, my whole book is marked up like this, and I don't expect you to mark it up quite that much, but I do expect you to make an effort. Okay, so that's all we got for tonight. Hope this helps. See you tomorrow.